thank you so much. It's not working. Oh, that's okay. Thank you all so much. Little history behind the Ashlyn Horry Foundation, and I'm really going to pray real hard that I get through this without the tears. I founded the Ashlyn Horry Foundation in 2008, but prior to her, well, not prior, but when she was born in 1994, there was nothing, as I'm sure you know, Cindy. I tried very hard to put in every key term on the net, and no results came back. I knew nothing about 1p36. All we were told when she was 3 months of age was that she has a partial deletion of her number 1 chromosome. What does that mean? Fast forward, at the age of 14, Robert and I got a letter with an official diagnosis, 1p36, which I was pronouncing at that time 1p36, but I've made it my mission, and I do believe that this somehow was God's purpose and plan for my life, to make sure that people like you, there are a lot of people that have written into me from all across the globe with questions, wanting answers, and I can't provide all the answers because as we are all in this pool together, we're still searching. And although Ashlyn is no longer here, I'm not going to rest till we do find out more. And I would like to just share a little story with you. This is my 3rd conference. We went to, and Ashlyn was here at that time, we went to Salt Lake City, Utah. The 2nd one was last year in Gatlinburg, and now this one. But last year, during the conference, there was a gentleman, a father, that stood up, and he had a question for the speaker, and that question was, how do we get the word out? How do we get more awareness out to people and to, raise funds? And the speaker offered several suggestions, and one of those was, well, if you know celebrities, if you know people with influence and platforms, they can help you. I sat there. I just wanted to slither down under my chair and walk out the door. Guilt consumed me, really. Many of you don't know me. Some of you do from Facebook. It took trips like this to get to meet Cindy and Callie and Joni from Katie, and we meet elsewhere, but that's okay. I ultimately had a meeting that next day with Ken over breakfast, and we talked about some things concerning the foundation and 1p36 DSA, and I brought up the question that was asked. And he turned around, he asked me, he said, Keva, why haven't you stepped up? Why haven't you said anything? And I just remember saying, I wasn't ready. With Robert being on the road consistently, there's a whole nother world to deal with. And a whole nother world with Ashland medically. I wasn't ready. I didn't have answers. People wanted answers. I couldn't give them. I wanted answers and wasn't in a position to really reach out at that time. And what you all didn't know was that there was a project that was placed in my heart years ago. Had written it, put it in the drawer, had gone back to it, wrote some more. And I finally, at the breakfast meeting that I had with Ken, I said, I'm working on a project, and it'll be out soon. And he looked, and I said, yes, I'm writing a book. And fast forward 7 months later, in February, that book was released, Glamorous Sacrifice. Thank you. I got the title, Glamorous Sacrifice, in a dream years ago. I had no idea what that meant. And when I say years, I mean years. I woke up during the course of the night, after the dream, wrote down those 2 words. That's it. I don't remember anything else from the dream. Had no idea it would turn into a book. But I can say that I believe in my heart of hearts that people's perception of what my life has been like or what they felt it should be like, being married to an NBA star, laying on the beach, sipping pina coladas, having the butler come to, of course we benefited from the financial resources. But where those really came into place, and most importantly, was that we were able to bring in our family when we needed help the most. Robert was always on the road. I was by myself. So that was very important. I have a girlfriend who says oftentimes, money is not to purchase all the extravagant things or collect all the things in life. They provide options to make life easier. And that's the way it was, seemingly, for me. I'm very much appreciative for the time that I had with Ashlyn. God allowed her to be here for 17 years, and she has blessed me and left me with so much that I can share with others, with the world. And I do believe that this is, although it wasn't my platform, I never bounced a ball, but I believe that through my husband's career, this platform was opened up for me so that I could share with everybody else not only Ashlyn's love of people, what she taught me through her characteristics, but the love of Christ through that. I'm just going to read a little excerpt from Glamorous Sacrifice, and this is how it began for me. The Clutch City Houston Rockets were on the road once again. Accompanied by my father, while visiting Ashland at the hospital, I was approached at her bedside by a doctor who requested to speak to us in the room. This particular room was where physicians would take families to talk with them before or after fatal situations. During the 3-month period we had already spent in the neonatal intensive care unit, I witnessed several families enter the room, but I never saw them return to the hospital. I could not believe it was my turn to go in there. I had the biggest lump in my throat again, and I felt it would suffocate me. This cannot be happening, I thought. My heart was pounding. Every thought that could have possibly gone through my head did in milliseconds. I kept holding on to the fact that Ashlyn was still alive. Several doctors had spoken to me earlier while I was in her unit. Why was this time so different? I was reluctant to cross the threshold of that room, but I wanted answers. I slowly walked in, and as I did, I could feel a coldness come over me. Dry mouth, numb feet, clammy hands, overwhelming anxiety had crept in. My dad followed directly behind me. The room was dimly lit, and I often wondered what that meant. Was it to serve as comfort on some level? There was a sofa on my left where my dad and I sat, and a coffee table directly in front of us. Conveniently, a box of Kleenex was positioned in the center of the coffee table. A team of surgeons, geneticists, and resident doctors filed into that room. All I remember to this day is a sea of white coats standing in front of me. I couldn't focus on their faces. I felt as if I had been knocked over with a feather. I will never forget what happened next. The spokesperson for the group began some semblance of an explanation about what was happening with our daughter's health. I understood him to say that Ashlyn had a very rare chromosome abnormality, which had caused a multitude of her problems. It is a partial deletion of her number 1 chromosome, he said. He continued explaining that because of the rarity of the condition, they were not able to offer much additional information with respect to a prognosis. He told me things were not looking good for Ashlyn. She had laryngomalacia, which we all thought would be successfully resolved with surgery. She had a G button placed in her stomach so she could sustain nourishment, and a fundoplication to cease the reflux. She had a kidney condition called renal tubular acidosis, known as RTA. She suffered from severe sleep apnea and also discovered that she had an irregular heart pattern. At this point, the doctor knelt down by the coffee table, as if that would increase my understanding, and said, if your daughter lives beyond this point, she will be mentally retarded. She may not have the facial distortion, but she will definitely be considered mentally retarded. She will have learning disabilities and more than likely will not be able to walk or talk. He added softly, I want you to know there was nothing that you and your husband did wrong or could have done differently. This was just a freak accident of nature. Well, so much for being consoled. It was somewhere between the word freak and the word accident that the anxiety left me. The anxiety left me because I'd heard the worst, and I was already shifting to survival mode. Nevertheless, it's nearly 2 decades later, and I've yet to completely digest those words. Hearing this news at 23 years old was devastating. Paralyzed with despair, all I could do was weep. And of course, that's when the box of Kleenex on the coffee table became convenient. I couldn't talk. I couldn't stand up to walk. I couldn't even see. I was blinded by my own tears. My dad, with tears streaming from his eyes, leaned over to hold me. All he could say repeatedly was, I'm so sorry. It was just too much to process. How could this be happening? That was a legitimate out-of-body experience for me. In hindsight, I can see God's grace in that moment. I desperately needed my father to be with me, and God graced me with him exactly when I needed him. After the original download of information, another physician asked if I had any questions. I thought, are you kidding me? Of course I didn't have any questions. I couldn't think clearly enough to form one. I didn't have to say a word, though. The expression on my face clearly conveyed what was going through my mind. I got a little problem with that. After what seemed like an eternity of crying and nearly hyperventilating, while a bunch of people in white coats were staring at me, I managed as best I could to squeak out the words, I want to be alone. Everyone left, including my dad. Poor thing, he just wanted to fix it for me. I still remember the look on his face as he walked out. He looked back at me as if he could save me from my pain. Daddy's little girl. But this time, There was nothing Daddy could do. Sorry. Similarly, there seemed to be not much more the doctors could do. Alone in that room that had instantly become hell, I began to question God out loud with selfish conviction. Why me? Why my child? Why any child, for that matter? What did I do that was so wrong? My questions turned into demands. I'm not sure if one would call it a prayer, but it went a little like this. God, I don't understand what's going on, but I've heard what the doctors have to say. Now I want to know what you have to say. You created her. Her life has a purpose, just like everyone else's. This is beyond my control. You fix it. At that moment, my daughter's condition became a spiritual battle for me. Come what may, and fearful or not, I had to stand firm in my faith and on God's promises for my daughter as I walked the journey out. My confident conclusion was that Ashlyn would either be going home to be with the Lord, or she was leaving that hospital and coming home with her family. Either way, I'd be victorious. And I stand before you today, still victorious. I miss her, but I'm still victorious.
Like most couples, Keva and Robert Horry were ecstatic about welcoming their first child into the world.
There was no indication that there would be any problems whatsoever. Great prenatal care. There was no problems whatsoever.
When Keva first got pregnant, it was a happy time. I remember times where we'd be laying in bed and Ashlyn would be pushing on her stomach. And she's like, oh, it's hurting so bad. And then I would just rub it, and it's almost like she knew it was my touch, and she would calm down. So that was one of the things that one of those moments you will always remember, and one of those moments we will always share.
As soon as I gave birth, the doctor placed her in my arms, and I, kind of bonded with her a little bit. And they took her off to get her cleaned up and everything. And that took about 2-3 hours. And she had 10 toes, 10 fingers. Everything was perfect. I mean, her face was perfect, cute little lips, but she wasn't breathing properly. And they could not give me answers. And from there, they life flighted her to Texas Children's.
And my mama, I remember her telling me, like, baby, don't panic. She was saying, Ashlyn, they had to rush her to the hospital, and some things going on.
Ashlyn was hospitalized for 6 months.
6 months, we brought her home. It still wasn't until she was 14 that we got an unofficial diagnosis.
The diagnosis was 1p36 deletion syndrome, a chromosomal abnormality.
It wasn't like having a normal child on a routine that could do everything for himself after a while. I was her hands, her feet, and she came home under the care of nurses 24 hours around the clock. I had no way of knowing. She had sleep apnea that was really bad, but she was still on a lot of medications. She was on a lot of apparatuses in terms of machines and helping her to breathe. So it was not fun. It was not your normal experience with your first child. We made it work, or tried to anyway. So it was very difficult, very difficult.
Ashlyn was eventually able to attend school with special provisions.
She was so outgoing, happy, loving, real easy to get to know, and we just took to her right away.
5 years after Ashlyn was born, the Orys welcomed a baby boy into the family, Cameron. The siblings formed a bond.
A lot of times I just had a bunch of fun with her, even though she couldn't do what most sisters could do.
Her personality, she was loving, she was caring, she was full of joy.
My favorite thing was her books. You know, you could put those books down and she'll make you read that book a million times, but that was her, and that's one of the things that we shared also.
Keva and Robert did everything they could to provide a happy life and home for Ashlyn, including throwing a lavish 16th birthday party.
And I think probably my fondest memory of Ashlyn would have to be her 16th birthday party. It was over at the Horry residence, and we came, it was a beautiful day, sunny, and Ashlyn she looked like a princess, she did. She was so happy, and all her friends and family were around her, and her smile, I mean, it was contagious just to see this child and how happy she was and how much everybody loved her.
Ashlyn lived for another year after the party, which was considered miraculous when the expectation was she wouldn't live much past infancy.
And indeed, the expectation for someone like Ashlyn with her disease, her genetic underlying problem, would have been limited. However, God's expression for her in her life was one of joy, fulfillment, self-will, self-determination, and that exceeded everyone else's expectation.
She acquired a lot of pneumonias over the last 3 years of her life, and ultimately her lungs, her kidney, all of her major organs took very bad hits, and her little body just couldn't take it anymore. I just kept feeling like, okay, God, there has to be more to life than this. Something good has to come out of this.
And that feeling led to creating the Ashlyn Horry Foundation.
It focuses on obviously bringing awareness to the 1p36 deletion syndrome.
The foundation will seek to those families who have questions and need answers and reliable resources as well.
Early diagnosis is so key in these genetic disorders. Doctors need to be educated on what 1p36 is. Nurses need to be educated on it so that we can be there for the family.
I think that just the Horry name and the fact that the foundation exists, the fact that you go places, helps to educate not only physicians, but parents of this particular condition. Resources, I think that having a website, having printed materials, having lived a life with a child with the syndrome can indeed offer a resource to be available to them. And most of all, I think that what you all offer is hope.
And by no means do I have all the answers, but I have the answers based on my experience that I've had with my daughter.
I can envision her loving events, any kind of event, as long as there's people, and she would be very happy to represent her organization, and I think other students would. I think that little girls, princesses like she was, would love to have little makeover parties, maybe some fashion shows, game days, going to all sorts of different events, having birthday parties, dances.
I think, because sometimes just a little bit of help when people are struggling puts a smile on their face and let people know that they care. And I think that's the biggest key that I think we want to put out there, is to help people and put that smile on people's faces.
She would think it was pretty cool because it's reaching out to kids that are like her and have similar disabilities, and she would be proud of it.
I'm most proud of what she really left me with, a strong sense of love and humility. And that's what I desire to have reflected through the Ashlyn Horry Foundation.